Everyone, please take your seats. The table is set with the finest china worthy of a true Sunday supper when families gather to share hearty home-cooked meals. It's time to resurrect the forgotten feasts of Sundays past. Grab your forks and join the feasts. Salmon loaf wasn't just food, it was a performance. Canned or fresh salmon was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and a whisper of lemon, then baked into a firm, fragrant loaf that sliced like cake and smelled like the promise of payday. Topped with a drizzle of creamy dill sauce, it graced church potlucks and family tables alike. It was the kind of meal that said, "We make do and make it delicious." But as fresh fish became easier to buy and casseroles took over, salmon loaf quietly swam off into the sunset of forgotten fare. Still, not every dish needed an oven to shine. Some earned their fame straight from the refrigerator shelf, cool, creamy, and full of charm. Deviled eggs were proof that a few humble ingredients, hard-boiled eggs, mustard, paprika, and a touch of vinegar, could turn a picnic platter into fine dining. They were the life of every potluck, dressed up in their pastel Tupperware armor, lined in perfect rows like edible pearls. Every grandmother had her secret ratio, a little more mayo here, a bit more bite there, and heaven help the relative who dared to improve her version. Once the darling of every family gathering, deviled eggs lost their spotlight to store-bought dips and finger foods that required less effort and fewer napkins. But somewhere deep in the collective memory, there's still the unspoken benchmark of what homemade really means. And speaking of homemade, few dishes captured the spirit of slow love like cabbage rolls. Tender leaves stuffed with ground beef, rice, and onions, simmered in tomato sauce until every bite tasted like patience. It wasn't fast and it wasn't fancy, but that was the point. Making cabbage rolls was an act of devotion, a quiet, fragrant promise that good things are worth the wait. The kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and sweet tomato, and everyone knew dinner would be special. In time, frozen meals replaced slow-cooked traditions, and the humble cabbage roll became a relic of another rhythm, a slower, richer one. But ask anyone who's tasted one fresh from the pot, and they'll tell you, some flavors can't be rushed. And when Sunday evenings lingered longer, when conversation stretched as lazily as the sunset, the table called for something lighter, something that tasted like the transition between supper and story time. That's when ham salad sandwiches made their appearance, creamy, tangy, and unapologetically nostalgic. Chopped ham mixed with relish, mayonnaise, and a dash of mustard, spread generously between slices of soft white bread. It wasn't elegance that made it memorable, it was comfort. The kind of comfort that made leftovers feel intentional. Wrapped in wax paper for Monday's lunch or served with sweet tea on Sunday evening, it was both thrifty and thoughtful, the grand finale to a day built around togetherness. But some Sunday suppers weren't just about family tradition or frugality, they were about community, the kind of dish that could feed the whole neighborhood without complaint. There was a quiet kind of magic in the way baked beans brought people together. No matter where you were, a church picnic, a farmhouse, or a tiny kitchen with one working burner, a pot of baked beans meant someone cared enough to wait. Sweet molasses, tangy mustard, a whisper of bacon fat. They simmered for hours, low and slow, until the beans turned tender and glossy, almost candy-like. The smell alone could stop time. Families guarded their recipes like treasure maps, each one with its own ratio of sweetness and smoke. These weren't just side dishes, they were edible memories of backyard laughter and long prayers before meals. But in a world that traded slow cooking for instant meals, baked beans faded into the background, replaced by the kind that came from cans instead of cast iron. And as the beans cooled on the stove, another dish waited quietly in the oven, one that spoke of gardens, resourcefulness, and pride in making the most of every season. Stuffed zucchini was the gardener's answer to abundance. When summer overflowed with too many vegetables, grandmothers found a way to make even the extras feel special. The zucchini was hollowed out and filled with ground beef, breadcrumbs, onions, and herbs, then baked until the top turned golden and fragrant. It was the sort of meal that celebrated simplicity, the elegance of using what you had. Each bite was a blend of comfort and cleverness, the flavor of thrift turned into art. And though it's been pushed aside by fancier fare, it remains a quiet masterpiece of home-cooked ingenuity. And then there were the dishes that crossed oceans and stayed for good. Baked ziti, for instance, wasn't just pasta. It was Italian-American poetry in a casserole dish. Layers of ziti noodles, ricotta, mozzarella, and tomato sauce baked together until the cheese melted into molten glory. It was hearty, joyful, unapologetic food, the kind that could turn any Sunday dinner into a celebration. When a pan of baked ziti hit the table, it meant one thing: you were loved, and you'd better be hungry. As Italian immigrants settled across America, they brought this humble dish with them, and for decades it was the centerpiece of countless family gatherings. Potato salad was one of them, creamy, cool, and comfortingly familiar. Whether it was made with mustard or mayonnaise depended entirely on geography and family loyalty. One thing was certain: everyone believed their grandmother made the best one: diced potatoes, chopped eggs, celery, and that perfect balance of tang and tenderness. It was simple food that tasted like belonging. On the surface, it looked plain, but every bite carried the flavor of community. A bowl of potato salad could feed a dozen people, but it also fed the soul, one heaping spoonful at a time. And after all the hearty dishes came something gentler, something soft and sweet. Milk toast might not sound glamorous, but in its day it was the cure for everything from a bad day to an upset stomach. Warm milk poured over buttered toast, dusted with sugar or cinnamon, it was comfort in its purest form. Some called it poor man's pudding, but grandmothers called it love. It was the dish that soothed the sick, calmed restless children, and warmed cold mornings. And while it's rarely seen today, its spirit lingers. In every bowl of cereal, every late-night snack, every small, quiet bite meant just to make you feel better. And when the world needed something stronger than comfort, when it needed a little indulgence with its warmth, the next dish stepped up with confidence and just the right amount of mischief. There was a time when the simplest comfort could carry a whiff of sophistication, and nowhere was that balance more perfectly struck than with Welsh rarebit. Despite the name, there's no rabbit involved, just molten cheese, beer, mustard, and a dash of spice poured over toasted bread. It was the British Isles' gift to anyone who believed dinner should involve both dairy and drama. Grandmothers treated it like liquid gold, whisking the sauce until it was glossy enough to reflect the Sunday lamplight. Served bubbling and golden, it felt like a reward for surviving the week. But as pre-sliced cheese and microwaves invaded the kitchen, Welsh rarebit slipped into culinary myth, remembered mostly by those who recall its smell: sharp, rich, and unapologetically indulgent. And while Welsh rarebit flirted with elegance, the next dish brought full, hearty grandeur. Beef with Yorkshire pudding and gravy wasn't just a meal, it was an event. The beef roasted low and slow until tender, the drippings whisked into a rich brown gravy, and the pudding, that airy golden miracle, puffed up like it had been blessed by the angels of Sunday lunch. It was a British tradition that found a second home in America's heartland, where families loved its warmth and theater. The sizzle of beef fat, the aroma of roasting, it was enough to make anyone forget the worries of Monday. Today it's rare outside of holiday tables, but for those who remember, it was the taste of both effort and reward. When the plates were cleared and appetites tamed, the sweet course stepped in, a tradition as sacred as grace before meals. Lemon cheese tart, for instance, wasn't just dessert, it was balance in edible form. The tart's buttery crust held a filling that danced between sweet and sharp, rich and refreshing, a little like life itself. The recipe was simple but deceivingly elegant, and when a grandmother pulled one from the oven, the kitchen smelled like sunlight. Served with a dusting of sugar and maybe a dollop of cream, it turned an ordinary Sunday into something memorable. But over time, instant puddings and boxed cakes replaced it, leaving lemon cheese tart as a relic of hand-whisked patience. Still, its flavor lives on wherever simplicity meets perfection. And while dessert sweetened the close of dinner, something had to accompany the conversation that followed. Soft laughter, the rustle of a newspaper, and maybe a story about how things used to be. That's where a pot of Earl Grey tea made its entrance. Aromatic, floral, and dignified, it wasn't just a drink, it was punctuation for the evening. Served in chipped china or sturdy mugs, it carried a quiet elegance that even coffee couldn't match. Its bergamot fragrance filled the room, a sign that Sunday had finally slowed down. Tea wasn't about thirst, it was about connection. One more excuse to linger before the dishes were done. These days, it's been outshined by espresso shots and energy drinks, but for many, the comfort of tea remains the truest kind of luxury. And just when you thought the evening couldn't get cozier, there it was. Few smells could summon a kitchen full of curiosity faster than the rich, buttery aroma of salmon patties frying in the pan. They were the answer to an age-old question: what do you do with leftover fish and a family to feed? Grandmothers turned simplicity into gold. Flaked salmon mixed with breadcrumbs, egg, onion, and a touch of lemon shaped into tender rounds and fried until golden brown. Served with a squeeze of lemon or a dollop of tartar sauce, they were proof that leftovers could become legends. But grandmothers never stopped at fish. They had a way of turning even the strangest combinations into something special. Lime cottage cheese salad was one of those peculiar masterpieces, bright green, jiggly, and strangely elegant. A mid-century classic, it combined lime gelatin with cottage cheese, pineapple, and whipped cream. The result? A salad that looked like a dessert and tasted like nostalgia itself. It appeared on every Sunday table between the 1950s and 1970s, a symbol of post-war creativity and optimism. Sure, modern taste buds might blink twice at it now, but back then it represented progress, a little taste of the future shimmering in pastel green. And for all its quirks, no meal captured the heart of Sunday quite like a steaming bowl of cream of mushroom soup. Velvety, savory, and earthy, it wasn't just soup, it was soul food for anyone who'd had a long week. Made from scratch with fresh mushrooms, onions, and a splash of cream, it turned humble ingredients into something almost luxurious. Some families used it as a base for casseroles, others served it straight from the pot with a hunk of bread for dipping. Either way, it brought everyone to the table. Though canned versions later became pantry staples, the homemade kind still reigned supreme, smooth, rich, and deeply human, like the stories told over it. And for those who preferred something unexpected, something that sounded odd but somehow worked, there was chicken livers with caramelized apple. Sweet met savory in a way that felt almost rebellious. The rich metallic tang of liver balanced perfectly with the golden sweetness of sautéed apples, a pairing that shouldn't make sense but somehow tasted like pure autumn. Served over toast or mashed potatoes, it was a dish that whispered of European influence but spoke fluent Southern comfort. It's mostly forgotten now, a victim of changing tastes and squeamishness about organ meats, but in its time it was both daring and divine. Just as one flavor faded, another rose, louder, crunchier, and made for crowds. Fried catfish and hush puppies brought the spirit of the South to Sunday tables. Golden fillets, crisp to perfection with hush puppies, those deep-fried cornmeal bites, alongside. It was a dish that combined abundance with community, the kind of meal that made front porches feel like banquet halls. The scent of hot oil and cornmeal was enough to gather the whole neighborhood, and a squeeze of lemon sealed the deal. Today it's mostly a treat at festivals or diners, but back then it was the sound of Sunday, laughter, sizzling, and the soft hum of gospel radio. And as the plates cleared and the last crumbs were chased with sweet tea, the kitchen would start to quiet, but not for long. Because the pot on the stove was still bubbling, and the next course carried the kind of comfort that only came from a long simmer and a heavy spoon. There was something quietly poetic about a pot of beef and barley soup simmering on the stove. The way the grains swelled, the beef softened, and the scent filled every corner of the house. It wasn't just dinner, it was devotion, This was a dish that didn't shout, it comforted. The barley gave it substance, the vegetables added sweetness, and the beef grounded it all in warmth. Grandmothers used it to stretch what they had, but the result always tasted generous. Each spoonful was a reminder that patience was a secret ingredient no recipe could replace, and while instant soups and frozen meals have tried to replicate that flavor, nothing compares to the slow alchemy of a Sunday pot that's been tended all afternoon. When that soup bowl finally emptied, the next dish arrived like a humble encore, simple, earthy, and utterly satisfying. Potatoes and green beans might sound ordinary, but together they made a symphony of comfort. The beans, crisp, tender, and bright, mingled with soft, buttery potatoes, often cooked with a little bacon or onion for good measure. It was a side dish that didn't need to impress, it just needed to be there. For many families, it was the quiet backbone of every Sunday meal, the kind of dish that never got applause but always got seconds. In its simplicity, it carried the spirit of home, steady, honest, and enduring. And that was the beauty of Sunday suppers. They weren't just meals, they were rituals, small ceremonies of love disguised as dinner. Every dish told a story of migration and invention, of scarcity turned to abundance, of generations who found joy in feeding others.